Dan Richards, welcome to the Foxhole, man.
Well, thanks, George. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I hope you are.
Yeah, I absolutely am. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you as a recently invited speaker to the Cosmic Summit 2025, buddy.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I've already been planning out my presentation and stuff, and a little nerve-wracking speaking to so many people for the first time, but I'm going to make sure I've got something worth doing. So,
you know, it's funny, as the host, you kind of forget because you reach out to people who are communicators, right? So there are all these people that got millions of views and all this. It's really cool. And you kind of figure that they don't have any public speaking anxiety. And that is not the case. And I won't give you the names, right? But several of the speakers who can do hours and hours of podcasts, they've never been really up on a stage to talk to 600 people. So I don't blame them. I suffer terribly from, public speaking anxiety, and particularly, and you may have the same problem, not the speaking almost as much as the content. You want to have the right stuff up there. So I get PowerPoint anxiety, right? Like Praveen Mohan, I'll share that. Praveen was open about that. He had never done a big public presentation, except every week he speaks to 3 or 4 million people worldwide. Isn't that crazy?
It is a lot different. I mean, I feel pretty comfortable right here, and one person could watch, or 1,000 people could watch, or 1 million people could watch, and I'd still be sitting right here feeling comfortable. But it's a different thing when you're staring at those faces, right?
And Dan, you do a fantastic job, man. I am a big fan, and you have got a special gig going that's very important to us, and I want to dig in hard on it. Maybe first, since people can, when you watch a personality like yourself and you come to like the person on YouTube, you kind of wonder, you want to know a little bit more about them. So let's go ahead and start with some biography and where you're coming out from this, when you first got interested in these, whatever comes to mind that you think that that your viewers might want to hear, in this context.
The thing that really got me started with ancient Egypt was in 4th grade, a teacher had our art teacher had a reward day that was Egypt Day. And my family was really religious, and then like this intertwining of religion with these like huge edifices that were still there today and all this weird iconography. It was just fascinating to me. And then years later, I read Sign and the Seal from Graham Hancock. And so I thought that was just amazing. And pre-ordered Fingerprints of the Gods from Hastings back when they were still around. And so I read that like when it was hot off the presses, and been into this stuff ever since. It's when I got custody of my son about 9 years ago, I kind of tapped out of getting into that stuff because I was taking care of him. But he's a teenager now, and it's perfectly happy for me to go find something else to do besides interfere with his universe. So now I get to look into pyramids again, and I watched Ancient Apocalypse, and so I'm like, okay, well, we'll see what the YouTube universe has to say, and saw Mini Minute Man and Stefan Milo's responses, and I was just like, this is ill-informed and just kind of gotcha moments, and these guys are representing science. Like, what the hell's this? So I made my first videos, and here we are now.
What is the concept of a term you have coined that is invaluable to unconventional history studies, I believe now, DeDunking? What is DeDunking, Dan?
A lot of these guys will say that they dunk on somebody. It's a kind of a younger guy's, thing. I dunked on so-and-so. I saw Mini Minute Man saying that about Hancock. He's like, haha, get dunked on, Graham Hancock. And so I'm like, well, we'll debunk that, but we'll dedunk that. We'll just undo your debunking there.
Yeah, and this might sound to people kind of silly and maybe a little childish, but it's a dynamic that goes on in science and science communication, where someone makes astounding reports, for instance, the Comet Research Group, and someone comes out and generally does a slipshod study, and we can go through them, everything from Sun Owl to Suravel to Scott saying that the carbon fuels were bugs and bug poop and things like that. They'll come out, they'll do the hit piece, either in a paper or, like you're responding to in videos, and it'll be terribly damaging because it's easy to dislodge something that sounds incredible and hard to believe we didn't discover such a thing. Someone makes a claim, someone dunks it, and much of the public checks out right then. And then you're left as the primary researchers, like I've been on a couple of instances, and you're like, holy shit, they didn't dunk on me. He's dead wrong about the details. And then you, Dan Richards, the earth has coughed up another communications genius for our team and brought you on the scene to pull the ball out of the hoop and show us what's really going on, man. And that's invaluable.
Well, thanks, George. I complain about it a lot. It really irks me when scientists portray information wrong to the public. And I've said this a number of times. The Atlantis hunting community, for lack of a better term, we need skeptics. We do need people to come in here and to be like, get on the right track. Like, one of my favorite quotes to illustrate this is Einstein said, at some point, he said something to the effect of, the theory of relativity is almost unrecognizable to me now that the mathematicians have gotten a hold of it. He had this idea, he had science behind it, but it took other guys to come in there and look at it with the skeptical eye to hammer it out. But they couldn't be cynics about it. They couldn't be throwing it out entirely just because he got one or two details wrong. And that's what we have now. It's part of it's the social media atmosphere. You know, it's picking apart minor things that somebody got wrong is not nearly as interesting as just dunking on them. And like you say, that people can have the information wrong and nobody's going to look. There's this is, you know, a TikTok community, the TikTok universe now. So you can if the BS you feed somebody tickles their confirmation bias, they run with it. And that from the press is bad enough, but from scientists, I mean, it's like, this is a fundamental act of treachery to humanity. You're paid, you're respected, you're put on a pedestal. Can't you at least, you know, do what you're supposed to do?
You do a lot of research.
I do a lot of research. I'm accused frequently of just reading the titles or just using search terms to search, but that's not the case at all. I read a lot of papers, and there's a lot of the information is pretty interesting. A lot of it is really dry, and a lot of it, admittedly, a lot of it takes a lot of time just for me to figure out how to completely parse. That's why I try to speak to experts when they'll have me. I've said this before, just to be straight up honest, a lot of the way that I detect BS from these debunkers is just with basic psychology. The same things that would let me know that the rays are full in a poker game. Just looking at the guy and you're like, man, you were talking like a scientist 2 sentences ago, and now it's all of a sudden, it's not the evidence implies, it's all of a sudden, we know for a fact, yeah, okay. We don't know it for a fact. That's not science speak. So, okay, let's scratch the surface, look under the hood. Generally speaking, that's when they're misrepresenting something.
There was a great example of that in a recent video of yours where you took John Hoops, put him on the couch, and said that the notorious John Hoops of Kansas State University is actually suffering from projection, right? And maybe you could describe Hoops's role as a persistent critic of a number of ideas that we're interested in, and also how he projects.
Hoops is he's almost like the evil wizard behind the scene. He tries to stay out of the limelight. He tries to not be, but out there fighting in the trenches. He tries to constantly make sure that the people around him are using his ammunition. He heavily edits Wikipedia and is proud of it, and encourages students to do the same. And then he will frequently say, well, you should use Wikipedia, so calling out to Forbes, hey, Forbes, you should be using Wikipedia, without disclosing that he's the one that edits that page. And he put this in an SAA article that from last year, same kind of thing, where he's talking about Graham Hancock's Wikipedia page. It's like, you edit the thing, but he doesn't disclose that. I mean, that is a kind of a breach of ethics. That's not really supposed to happen. Consistently, basically, he does a lot of bad faith things. John Major Jenkins is an individual that he lied about in a scientific publication. John Major Jenkins was very much into astronomy and the 2012 thing, and he had some spiritual beliefs, but he was a student of Mayan astronomy, and Hoops accused him of being a professional astrologer. And when pressed on this, he couldn't provide evidence, but he didn't withdraw his statement.
How does Hoops suffer from projection? I thought it was fascinating that you dug up some of his earliest musings along these lines.
First of all, he got into archaeology because was into lost civilizations and Atlantis and all that stuff.
As a child?
Yeah, as a child and as a teenager. So that's one way where he probably feels a little bit of shame that didn't get into real archaeology like Flint Dibble's dad brought him in, and real archaeology. Hoops' origin story involves Atlantis. But the biggest way I think that he is into projection personally is he's constantly accusing. He basically takes 19th century guys that wrote about Atlantis, like Ignatius Donnelly, that had some beliefs that in the modern day are certainly unsavory. And he tries to attribute these white supremacist ideas to Atlantis hunting in general. You guys just are you got to be careful. You enable a lot of those really bad people. And the fact of the matter is, in the 18th century, or the 19th century, excuse me, and today, archaeology and anthropology have done infinitely more damage as far as white supremacy goes than Atlantis hunting. They can cite an author saying some unsavory things in a book, but they're sitting in institutions full of bones that are still in violation of repatriation laws to indigenous Americans, and they've got a history of looting artifacts and all kinds of stuff. So when they start saying, you guys, your ilk, talking about us Atlantis hunters, you guys were racist 150 years ago. It's like, well, he's only complaining about that because the racism from 150 years ago, it's still in his very, very university. Kansas University, the KU has bones that are in violation of NAGPRA right now. And this has to get in his psyche. He wants to fight racism, but he's working at a place that is literally built on it as far as his department. So,
and why hasn't he repatriated these bones? If he's got, sympathies for, these issues and probably publicly agrees with NAGPRA, why doesn't he return those bones? Or is it within his power?
Well, he's not the person in charge of repatriation, but he could certainly offer up his expertise and take the time to do so, which he's way too busy writing letters about how terrible Graham Hancock is and the Comet Research Group and everybody else. That's basically, he could contribute to it. One of the biggest problems with NAGPRA violations is NAGPRA was passed in 1990. And so you're talking 34 years they've had to repatriate bones. But a lot of these archaeologists back then didn't want to see these things passed. The political climate was considerably different back then. And NAGPRA was a big fight for a lot of people. So a lot of institutions just kind of were like, we don't, here's some back. And then they kept some. And this just keeps kind of coming to light. And they can't prove that because nobody left a note that said, hey, we're going to hide these bones. But it's become pretty clear because almost every single institution in America that is like 100, 150 years old, has an anthropology department, has some bones that are in violation of NAGPRA, and that's come to light in the last 10 years or so. It's just all over the place. It's so ubiquitous that when an archaeologist on Twitter starts babbling about racism, if they work in the States, the first thing I do is Google the university they work at, Google NAGPRA violation, just throw it in their face. You want to fix racism, turn around and clean out your damn basement because it's always their own house.
It brings to mind one of my criticisms that I think is very legitimate and frankly effective, because we're trying to change people's minds and take away the credibility that these guys walk in with because they got some letters beside their names. And that's their willingness to dismiss the oral histories of indigenous people around the world, right? Yeah. 250, 300 cultures share as their origin story that there was a golden age, there was a tremendous catastrophe of flood, fire, earthquakes, and fire from the sky, and giant waves. And then very few people made it through. We share that motif, intellectual thinking worldwide. And then they dismiss it as campfire stories. So the most important thing the culture tells you, their origin story, they are willing to say, despite forensic evidence coming to light that there may be something to it, that they're willing to say that this is a bunch of bunkum. Do you think they're weak on that point as well?
I definitely think they're weak on that point. If you're going to, there's a big deal with the difference in perception. And just if you're looking at this from just purely from a psychological perspective and trying to view it from the perspective of an archaeologist and of an indigenous American, like the archaeologist sees these stories as basically a primitive form of wannabe science. We're trying to figure out where we came from. We're trying to figure out, explain how this rocks got in this pool or whatever. To the indigenous Americans, the very attempt by white man science to come in and explain these stories to them is just one more step of colonization. And it's like, if you are to somebody who's a lot of people are Christians, and they should understand this, to an indigenous American that maintains their indigenous beliefs, they do not want somebody to come in and tell them what that story means. They know. So these guys are extremely offensive to the people that hold those stories most dear. These guys represent colonization, and they represent the nice little story you got there, Timmy. Go sit at the kids' table. It's a very dismissive attitude.
It's brown people sitting around the campfire making up stories.
That's exactly it.
And it's really a relic of the 19th century. Again, they're saying that there's some kind of latent racism, in a precursor civilization. But I think there's a much more direct intellectual lineage to the 19th century, casting aside all biblical interpretations, and some of that was very legitimate. But I think people like us believe that they threw the baby out with the bathwater, and that there may have been, and that there certainly was truth to the catastrophic stories of the past. Okay. So the 19th century, they were pushing all that aside with Darwin, and it was easy to push that aside because they were also racists, right? So they called them campfire stories, and that has been retained in academia to this day. And I think it's a fruitful area to start calling the SOBs out on, right? I mean, maybe even some of the tribes could come forward and say, hey, fellas, quit stepping on our stories. That's as important as our bones.
Yeah, they do. They come out and say the things pretty frequently, to the point where what my most recent edited video was covering a couple of local tribal stories, and I was very careful to make sure that I did not deviate from what they said or any of that, and because I'm aware that this shit's important to these people, and it might seem weird to us because we have our stories we get taught at Sunday school and stuff, but theirs have been kind of brushed aside in a lot of ways. To find some of these, like you'll find one or two Google hits, no Wikipedia page, nothing like that. There's no, you go look up Jacob's coat of many colors and there's a Wikipedia page and 500 other pages. You go look up one of these indigenous myths and there's one hit and it's theirs. So a lot of that stuff is, there's a reason that they're so possessive of it. There's a school here in Spokane that's a immersive language school for the Salish language. It's only 100 years dead, but it's dead. There's 3 people in the world that can speak it fluently.
Really?
So they teach. And it's what the people here spoke 100, 150 years ago.
So you're in Spokane, Washington, and have you lived there your whole life?
No, I was born here, and then I grew up in Southern Illinois, and then we moved back up here when I was a teenager.
And you're an electrician, correct?
I don't do it anymore.
I've run into, several people in our circles that were electricians, which is strange. You must have had some fascination with kind of the mystery of electricity. Did that kind of affect you in the same way?
That wasn't it as much as the construction side of things really solidified it for me as I got older. Like the one thing that I talk about frequently is the perimeter of the Great Pyramid, how square it is. It's 756 feet, barely deviates like a couple inches. You're not doing that with ropes. The regular means of squaring it aren't available. Like there's this big center mass, so you can't measure across the corners. So this is the kind of thing you're not going to do to that degree of accuracy with the technology that they're attributed to have. And so I'm not really a big fan of lost ancient high technology, but there's always this mystery that they baby with the bathwater, like you said earlier. They try to explain it with ropes and walk away from it.
So you're coming at it as a builder and a doer, kind of like the Snake Brothers are.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yes.
That you're used to making things and manifesting things, and you look at things that were manifest in the past and say, that's, I can't figure it out.
Oh, and a lot of it I try to figure out as best as I can. So, like, maybe a concave mirror was used to measure. You get a circle of light that's the same size at a distance, and we have that plate in the Museum of Cairo that's got concentric circles inside of it. So if a guy was to shoot that plate at a certain distance, if you fill up the center with light from a concave mirror, at a certain distance, the center circle would be filled with light, and then you'd step back. I'm not explaining it very well, I guess, but point is, it's kind of a mundane means of doing it. It wouldn't be high technology and could potentially work. I'd have to test it.
You're taking a mirror, and as you move more distantly, its reflection onto another surface will tell you where it is within that surface, which ring it is, tells you the distance.
Yeah. A concave mirror does like a magnifying glass. There's a point of focus that will start a fire, right? It's really hot. Okay, that circle is the same size at the same distance. You move the mirror away from a flat surface and you're going to have a ring that gets bigger. So if you take that mirror and calibrate it and say that, like, if you want 4 identical sides, that mirror could shoot, you could use that mirror to reflect, and you get that circle of light. That would be hot as piss. That's why you'd need that plate. But that circle would not change in size, hypothetically. Now, the mirror would have to be good and all of that jazz. But
is that in use now, or is that something you supposed or speculated may have been?
That's something I just thought up, thinking about technology that they might have had that usually doesn't get considered for this kind of thing.
And you consider the vases, and you've been very, very respectful of the patrons who've done the scanning, and I respect that in you. And I think you know that at least I know those guys. They're open minded. You've now made friends with Adam Young, right? So you two, even though you differ some, you've collaborated on bringing more attention to the subject in general, right? Tell us where you differ with Matt Bell and Adam, and even they might not be on the same side, but they believe that there was a technology that absolutely can't be described at this point. How would you describe that technology, and where do you part with them on the thinking?
I always stop before I get to things that are really hard for us to suppose that they had, for example, like the Dendera light, just to take an extreme example. There's a lot of steps you're going to have to get to find there. So I'm willing to go there, but we're going to need to go there one bit at a time. We're not just going to jump to it. The vases, the lathe. This definitely would push the dating of the lathe back by 1,500, 2,000, even maybe 3,000 years, depending. And I'm pretty certain the lathe was used in at least some of these pre-dynastic vases. Matt was kind enough to let me handle his collection, and my God, some of these are just absolutely amazing. They're. I'm not opposed to the idea of somebody spending their whole life making one of these things. If they're making it for somebody who's royalty, if they're part of a family, we see some things like that in the Japanese world with bonsai trees and stuff, with ginger farms and stuff, where this is generational things. They're working for their grandkids. So I'm not opposed to that kind of thinking here, and I think that both Matt and Adam believe that they were mass produced on a higher scale than that. But there are some mysteries that, for example, that there's one of the big pots that's got this tiny little hole in the top and it's widened way out on the inside. That's not the kind of thing you're going to do easily. Even with modern technology, you'd be using something articulated, some special tools made for that.
Yeah.
And I have a tough time imagining exactly what they would use for that thing. But I'm open to other possibilities. As a matter of fact, Christopher Dunn reached out to me after seeing me talking to Adam, and on the
cool.
yeah, here soon, me and him are going to start doing regular live streams talking about different artifacts that he's spoken of over the years, and he's open. As crazy as it is, as much as people try to say that's not the case, if you're not an asshole, people have no problem actually with a little bit of skepticism. You just can't come in there and be like, you're an idiot, and then expect them to not want you to get the hell out of their house, right? Only makes sense.
Or you're making it all up like Martin Sweatman.
Exactly. That when they just accuse people of things, it makes it very difficult to have a good faith conversation. I mean, the whole thing with vinegar and honey that Grandma told you. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar, right? Not complicated.
I think you just intuitively understand the scientific method, and obviously, are well read on it as well too. But you've also got an element of kind of basic human respect and graciousness, and interpersonability that you think is missing. So it's almost like the other side, one, doesn't allow that most of the research that we're touting is solid scientific research, right? That they have to dismiss it on other means or go ad hominem. But at the same time, not only do they undermine the scientific method or disrespect our use of it, they do it rudely. They do it in an ad hominem way. And it seems like that really digs you.
Oh man, well, it's bad enough for them to make it insulting. It's bad enough to say, this guy's a grifter, that guy's a liar. But when they get into the real, this is spreading white supremacy, or this is a common thing that they like to complain about is, the medical communities, the faith in the medical community is at an all-time low. And in 2022, they like 60% of Americans had faith in the medical community, and pseudo archaeology is a big part of that. It's like, dude, we all know what happened around that time, where there's a big old culture war surrounding this little virus that had people a little bit faith on both sides. People were not trusting their medical professionals. Yeah. That's what happened. And they try to pin that at the feet of Graham Hancock and everybody else. It's just like, my freaking God, you guys. It's just insane. Yeah. So when they do things like that, it's like Flint Dibble's out there right now saying, I have respect for these people, and I'm willing to talk to them or anything. You can't go around saying these guys are spreading white supremacist rhetoric, these guys are disrespecting indigenous people, and make these broad sweeping statements. These guys are liars, these guys are grifters, and then expect to sit down and have a polite conversation with them. You've been talking shit for months, years. You can't just now expect things to be nice.
I haven't seen Flint on Danny Jones. So did you watch that?
I've watched part of it. I haven't got through it all yet. But he was saying some, people send me clips too, and he was saying some stuff on there that was just like, I'm totally open to the idea of it. It's just that nobody can provide proper evidence. And it's like, well, compare that with the clip of Flint saying that Atlantis is as realistic as a flat earth. It's just as reasonable as a flat earth, he says. And then he says he's open to the idea. It's like, these are mutually exclusive, man, and you know it.
Yeah, he's kind of moving around depending on the context he's speaking in, isn't he?
And the person he's speaking to, when he was on the stream with the left winger Destiny, who's, as left wing as they come, and he had no problem hammering away at those left wing talking points. That when he was on the Joe Rogan Experience, as soon as Joe was like, "Hey," he was like, "Whoa, no, I had nothing to do with that." He plays politician.
And, incidentally, I've got a standing invitation to Flint to come to the Cosmic Summit for free, complimentary. And love to see him. I even give him a hotel room. I have to go back and look at my tweet. Maybe I said I'd pay for his travel, but which I would. Actually, I'll say it right here, that we treat him just like a speaker, but not require him to make a presentation. Just come and hang out and then, meet us at the bar and whatnot. I don't think there's going to be a fist fight. I think we'll come out all the better for it, right?
I don't think it would hurt.
And if anybody wants to tweet, Flint, to remind him that invitation is standing, please do, because I think he said he would only do it if there were a debate that he could participate in. And that's and we talked about it. You and I talked about whether we want to do that. And I don't know. It's really the other speakers don't like debates. And I think it's a generational thing, Dan.
One of the reasons that I end up doing a lot of the content that I do that seems to be defending other creators is because I don't have really a pet hypothesis like Matt and the vases, for example, we were just talking about, right? So this is where his energy is. When Matt's into this stuff, he's looking at the vases, he's looking at Egypt. He's passionate about it. But I'm into that stuff, but I don't have a belief per se. I'm just kind of looking around for different answers. And I see these guys just throwing crap in there, and they're in a lab coat corrupting the entire narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So I end up feeling like it needs addressed. And that's like my very first videos were that stuff. That's what brought me in. It wasn't I wanted to tell people how I think they built a pyramid. It was this guy's lying to you, getting it wrong when he's trying to explain to you how Hancock's wrong or this other guy's wrong.
What's your opinion on a precursor civilization, as I call it, to get away from the loaded term Atlantis? I always use that term. So I'm sure you've said it, but please restate it for us. As you can, as you want.
I think that it was. I think the big civilization it's spoken of back then was in what now they call Oceania. I think the Easter Island is like my best candidate for what their center of civilization, or what they at least believed their center was. And some of the reasons for that is if you look at every other site in the world that's a world naval, like where they call it the Omphalos, these are cultural centers.
They all have the same statues.
The rock in Jerusalem, it's in Jerusalem. The Oracle of Delhi, it's in Delhi. The trees in India, they're in where these massive temples, these cultural centers are. There were, we know that the people that, the scientists say that settled Easter Island, we know that these guys were settling all over that area, and they had islands all over that part of the world that they were in. But they picked this as their world naval, this little far-flung region way out in the hell in the middle of nowhere that most people can't even travel to. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It seems to me that's a remnant of what was before. And their ability to be like navigators and stuff, the seafaring ability would translate really quickly into building massive megaliths. So I think that's the kind of thing that may well have not even been a pre-flood deal. It was just something that they did to kind of declare we are here in the aftermath, like Göbekli Tepe, where there's this transference of knowledge and via farming and all these other buildings and creations and stuff as well. It seems to me like the megalithic thing was something that I think was more of a transference of sailing skills, especially the teamwork, if you think about that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's my opinion on it. I believe in Atlantis in the Pacific. So
we know there was genetic transfer into South America. I think it should be. I mean, we've just got to set aside the notion that there wasn't transoceanic communication. I mean, we've got it in the genetics. You've got it in just common sense. I mean, people can get blown across an ocean. It still happens a couple of times a year today.
That's absolutely right.
These were brave, capable people, and those were, of course, dangerous trips. But to say that they weren't made before 1492 is just ridiculous. Or, other great explorations of the world. I mean, surely you could have made it to South America many, many, many times in the past, and and probably from the Middle East as well. I think the Phoenicians, my God, they were wonderful sailors. Why would they have restricted themselves just to the Mediterranean? I don't think any seafaring man would do that. Yeah,
I don't think they could have restricted themselves. Some would have been blown off course.
Dan, where do you think your channel's going, man? Are you running out of material, or is there an endless well of it? Do you have trouble coming up with new ideas, or do they just pop in your head 3 times a week?
There's more content. I could do more response videos than I could shake a stick at. People want me to respond to the Danny Jones thing already, and I just came out as 3.5 hours. Like, whew. I'm working on one now that's it's a paper that's more of a manifesto. It's just horrible. Um, um, and then there's always things that are interesting to me that I see pop up on the news. Like it was earlier this year when they found the Mexican government acquired the codices from the Aztec ancestors. That was really interesting.
Highly recommend that episode, man. I had no
Thanks.
idea about those codices. I had missed that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff.
And to think that they may have been holding on to them for 400 years, that family, right? Whoever they obtained them from, it probably went all the way back. They probably weren't collectors. They were the holders of it. I guess that's just speculation, though.
It is speculative, but there's going to be a lot of people in that area that probably have things that are that old. That's not so speculative.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody was hiding one thing. I doubt it's the only one.
Do you have people in your regular life, in your social circle, people that you see in the flesh and the blood that are interested in this stuff? Or are you kind of like the rest of us, that you might have one or two at best?
I have a couple of friends that watch my stuff that have learned more about the stuff from that than anything else.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Your friends think, of course, you're being a little bit nutty. Then you start doing videos and things like that, and then they're convinced you're nutty. And then they see that it's kind of popular and watch some of it, and they say, hey, this ain't I get it now. It just takes a little while.
A friend of mine who was super skeptical of me pointing out where scientists were wrong. He was always telling me, he's like, why hasn't somebody else done this if that's what's happening?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's a certain respect for authority, I think. And I think science in general is worthy of respect, and a good scientist was worthy of respect, but not total deference. I think if you go and do the homework like you surely have, and over time I have, I've kind of lost the intimidation factor with these guys, and you surely have too. We have that in common, sir, along with a number of other things. Is that I think a lot of them also now, we're speaking about the YouTube scientists too. That I think the vast majority of people that are actually in labs are either unaware of what we're talking about, aware of it and somewhat curious, but not going to explore it with their grant funds, or quietly supportive and think we might be onto something. That's probably the majority of people. They aren't all sitting there, all archaeologists fuming at Graham Hancock. I think it just looks like low-hanging fruit to some archaeologists who, I guess, needed something else to do in their career that was more public and included getting likes and follows.
Well, it's a stepping stone for those types of creators, archaeologists and archaeology adjacent types.
Mm-hmm.
Debunk Graham Hancock.
Right. Well, it seems too that I guess they're going to have, I would think the younger archaeologists are either going to be woke, and for some reason, wokeness, I guess it's through the racial stuff. I don't know, but the woke type academics do reject us. But I think they're younger people as well. The Joe Rogan fans, right, that have been listening to stuff as well, that are coming along that are much more open minded to it. And we probably got better days ahead of us as far as willingness to study these ideas. I hope if we can just get the woke virus extracted.
It's self-selecting as far as the trades go or the fields go. I was speaking to a guy who recently dropped out of psychology, and he was almost done with getting a degree. And when he started doing, I don't know what they call it, internship stuff, he started working in the field some. And he realized really quick that it was like there was one ideology that was pressed, and he said a lot of basic psychology stuff was discarded. Like people wouldn't speak out about cry bullying. He says, which is like basic stuff that you see psychology 101 stuff, but they wouldn't speak out against it because of political reasons. And so he tapped out, and he points out that he's probably not the only one.
Yeah, and people underestimate people. People also like talking about the scientists that agree with us but don't necessarily speak publicly or aren't heard. There's a tremendous example in Wallace Broker, Wally Broker. You ever heard that name? He's a climate scientist. He was the one who supposedly termed the term global warming.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, well, good. I hope to see a video on that sometime. But Wally Broker, he was the discoverer, I guess the popularizer of the Younger Dryas event, right? And spent his entire career studying it and publishing on it, amongst other things. And he was at Lamont Doherty Observatory, Columbia's Earth Sciences lab. So he was arguably, and you'll see him hailed as such, the number one anthropogenic global warming scientist, all right? And he passed about 5 years ago in his 80s. So a lot of his influence was, late 70s, 80s, 90s and whatnot. But he had a tremendous influence. Wally actually came around to the Younger Dryas event and published his internal lab newsletter or whatnot, and said that he does believe that his iconic cold period was caused by an interaction with material from space.
Wow.
I mean, that's the number one guy. How they can go and say and then call people pseudo this and pseudo that when a leading light like him. And I'll tell you, there's another example, and you missed him by a couple of years, but Dr. Andrew Moore spoke at the 2023 summit in Asheville, right? And he is a recent past president, I think it's a couple of terms ago now, of the American, the Archaeological Institute of America, which is the largest archaeologist association in the world. Right. And he is a co-author and lead author of Younger Dryas impact papers. How the hell can they call us pseudo-archaeologists when the leader of the largest society in the world is writes publications on our hypothesis?
They've definitely played a PR game with it. Boslow's little missing data set, that has so much traction outside of the people that are believers in the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. If you're into it, that doesn't really matter. But if you are looking into it from the outside and you're the least bit skeptical, that missing data set is the first thing that's going to confront you, that's going to be like, whoa. And then you look into it and it's smoke and mirrors.
Great service to the Comet Research Group by addressing that, Dan.
Well, thanks, George. I appreciate that.
Walk us through that. What were they claiming? And it was bouncing around out there forever. I would get questions on it, and I just didn't even mess with it, kind of blew past it, but always felt guilty I hadn't addressed it. And another reason why I just welcome your presence on the scene, man, because you put that one to bed. Please describe what the missing data set meant to things and how you straightened it out.
Okay, the nanodiamond in the Greenland ice, Kurbatov et al.'s the paper. It says that it put the data in the National Snow and Ice Data Center. The data is not in the National Snow and Ice Center. That isn't good. There's no question. These kind of things do happen, though. Now, the accusation that Mark makes basically is they are withholding samples and not letting anybody further test the ice. And that's why they didn't send any to the National Snow and Ice Data Centers. And the implication is that nanodiamonds were seeded into the samples, and that's how they found it. Now, the National Snow and Ice Data Center does not house ice. It houses data. So if you assume that the Comet Research Group was full of crap and that they were going to lie, they would have lied to the National Snow and Ice Data Center, sent them whatever data they wanted them to archive, and then it would be archived there today. So this is just a clerical error. If they were doing nefarious stuff, they could have falsified the data.
Okay, help me out here. I got familiar with it a few weeks ago, and I'm not sure we talked about it some, but I wanted to have a follow-up conversation with you. Snow and Ice Data Center, it does not have the snow or ice. It has the data that has been derived from it. Okay. Is that consistent data? Is that being derived by one group, or is it every time someone goes and does an oxygen isotope thing and determines the temperature at that layer, they go tell the data center? Is that how it works?
Ideally, but they don't. Not everybody reports to them.
Yeah.
But that's the idea.
Why would it be unusual then to have no data for a particular layer? Because the Comet Research Group had reported data and then it was not there?
They claim that they did. See, here's the thing that's really funny about this. If that statement, all of these data sets are stored at the National Snow and Ice Data Center, if that statement wasn't there, this would be nothing burger. Because the data is in that peer-reviewed, published paper in a respected journal. The loophole that Mark Boslow's pulling at is that they said that they were going to house their data here, and it didn't show up there.
Okay. But as you said, there would have been no downside for them to report false data.
They could have reported whatever they want.
Okay, but why is it there's something on every line of that spreadsheet? Because they've gone and done the oxygen isotope stuff to do, as a proxy to temperature, correct? So they do, we know they do at least that. Maybe they're certainly not looking for nano diamonds through the entire strata, right? But somebody, the Camp Century Ice Core has gone down and done the isotopes all the way to just determine temperature, correct? Is that all in there? And why would there be something missing in the spreadsheet at that layer?
Well, it's not just that missing in the spreadsheet at that layer.
Yeah.
The data set's complete in the paper. They claimed that it was being reported to the National Snow and Ice Data Center. National Snow and Ice Data Center has nothing from that paper at all. Not in one layer. The entire data set's missing from that.
Is it as easy as getting the Comet Research Group to send that in?
It potentially could be. I'm not sure what the protocol is at this point. What I do know for a fact, Boslow has hounded the journal, told them, hey, this is missing a data set. The journal kept the paper up. I know that Kurbatov is considered one of the most respected people in that field. So they're not going to levy these accusations against him. So that this entire thing is basically, like we were saying earlier, people like run with confirmation bias and they don't really look under the hood. This is exactly what this is.
I'd like to put you in touch with Dr. West, Dr. Alan West. I'm sure you've seen his name on dozens of papers.
Of course. Yes.
Are you already in touch with him by email or otherwise?
I'm not, no.
Okay. Well, that'd be great, man. I hope I could kind of help out your Rolodex by putting you in touch with Alan. That'd
be great. Thank you.
He is a wonderful, wonderful man and a polymath, right? He is good at many, many things. He's not good at many things. He's great at many things. I mean, who can type, lithics and also run a transmission electron microscope, right? And also do very complex geochemistry and understand oral myth, comprehensively. I mean, there are so many disciplines that man is skilled at. He's been a wonderful resource to me over the years and obviously graciously let me join some of the papers. We've been in touch for 20 years. It'll be 20 years next year. Me and Alan have been buddies, which is just amazing. And I'd like to put you in touch with him too, right? Because I think something fruitful, I think something fruitful would come from it. And he's wonderful primary research, right? I mean, that is speaking to the Comet Research Group as effectively as you can with one person, right? And I hate to say it, but these gentlemen, and Alan's in good shape and he's going to be with us for a while, but they're all getting older, man, because what they did they were generally people who had other careers and other interests, and then they retired, like Ted Bunch from NASA, and they could go explore things that they weren't getting grants for before, right? And a lot of them, a lot of the greatest work in the Comet Research Group was done in retirement, and that started 20 years ago, right? So we've lost Ted Bunch and others. And I think that our generation of researchers, even though you and I are not credentialed as they are, but we need to be in good touch with them to carry the flame properly, right? Yep. And then the younger ones too. Yeah, I could put you in touch with Chris Moore as well, the University of South Carolina, and he's the younger generation leading light. So, hey, tell me, what is your presentation going to be? You said you're already kind of thinking about it, working on it. How are you going to approach it? And I exert no editorial control.
I'm looking at the kind of the psychological dynamic as to why these guys are so hell-bent on coming after pseudo-archaeology. It's and what kind of tactics to look for. Just basically, I kind of want to inoculate people against the bullshit. That's my plan.
Well, Dan Richards, I appreciate having you in Foxhole. Any thoughts or things you want to get across to our audience and stuff like that? I've got a couple of announcements.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm a YouTuber. I'm supposed to say that, right?
Hell yeah, man. And your channel's growing very well, isn't it? Both of our
channels.
Yeah,
it is. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you monetized?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We look forward to seeing a lot more. And we look forward to seeing you in Greensboro next year, man. It's going to be June 20th to 23rd. Okay, is the settled day. And that coincides with the summer solstice. So the longest day of the year is going to be the first day of the summit. And awesome. Yeah, so people, I encourage you to go get tickets now. Please buy them now. First of all, they're fully refundable. If your plans change, we'll give you your money back. But if we can, the more that we sell earlier, the more confidence we can have to make it, a very well-afforded conference. And put on the absolute best, because we're not trying to make money. We're just trying to avoid losing it. And if we know it's coming in, we can start spending it and bring in more speakers and better speakers and whatnot. I should also add in a little program note that Robert Edward Grant has accepted an invitation to speak. Have you come across him yet, Dan? Robert Edward Grant? Have you not? Look him up. You're going to enjoy getting to know him in person, man. He's quite the thinker. He's a deep dude. And let's see. So we got Robert Ed Grant, we got tickets for sale. And I guess most importantly, we have kind of a new format coming up on the 25th. Randall Carlson is going to host our first meteor stream, right? And a meteor stream is a $50 live stream and in person. We're going to also allow people to come in person, and we're going to have the venue set, but that's on the 25th of this month. We might have, say, 50 people in the room, and we hope to have, several hundred online. And Randall is going to give a very extensive overview of sacred geometry and geometrician type stuff, his mathematical understandings of the earth and sacred sites and whatnot. But that's on the 25th. He's going to be doing that out of Atlanta, and tickets are on sale for meteor streams at cosmicsummit.com for $50. And we hope we can get off to a good start with those. And we're going to do them, frankly, we're going to try to do them all around the world, right? So that you'll have a physical place you can go and meet some of the speakers, 50 to 100 people, and also hear from them in the meantime, in a live stream setting, and have it be interactive. So we encourage people to join there. But Dan, we are tremendously excited to invite you to Greensboro. Thank you for publicizing the Cosmic Summit on your YouTubes. And I'd like you to join some multi-speaker calls as we set them up between now and June, and maybe we'll jump back in the Foxhole as well, man. But just stay at it, buddy. You're a very, very valuable team member. Thank you.
Well, thank you, George. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the invite and the accolades. Congratulations on how well you're doing. I mean, I'm surprised that you didn't have a bigger YouTube presence already, as popular as the Cosmic Summit is. So I'm glad to hear you're getting monetized and all that.
Yeah. No, it's really fun to see it growing. We just passed 65,000 subscribers. And I should say as well, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and enjoy the Cosmic Summit on all major platforms at Cosmic Summit. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Thank you, George. Take care.